Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of r/ProRevenge. My name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do though, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as have notifications turned on, that way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. I made my high school chemistry teacher lose his job. I went to a ghetto high school in a poor community, but my parents raised me to work my ass off so I could get out of there. My parents never went to college, but because of this, myself and my siblings have all gone to good schools out of state. I maintained a 4.0 until the year in question in high school, taking 5 advanced courses a year, out of a total of 6, with the last 6th not offering an honors alternative. I learned to get very little sleep because of the amount of work that these courses required, and because my school didn't have tutoring aids or anything of the like. Didn't understand something? Tough. Get to Googling. So in one of my upperclassmen years, I signed up for an advanced chemistry course. I knew it would be hard, but assumed, like the rest of my courses, that if the class was minimally structured and Google came through per usual, I'd be fine. Other students warned me not to take the course, but since I wanted to go to college for chemistry, I knew I had to go through with it. The teacher was horrible. He was old, which is fine, and didn't offer after-class support, which is normal, but also didn't even offer in-class support. His answer to even basic questions was, "You should understand that, talk to me about it later." But later never came. He didn't offer lunch hours, didn't offer after-school hours, and in class would just put up the answers, which were already available online and in the back of the book. My family didn't have fancy tutor money, and none were readily available in my community anyways. I studied my ass off, but when the first test came back, I had a D-, with no notes to even understand what I had done wrong. When I went to speak with him about it right after class had ended, missing part of my next course in the process, he simply told me to look more closely at the textbook for help, and that he didn't have time for me. He was 2 weeks behind the explanations that he did give because he was constantly distracted. All of this is bad, but didn't deserve him being fired yet. What did was when he got dangerous. In an experiment working with hydrochloric acid, a plug held the concentrated stuff in a tube with some magnesium and reacted to form hydrogen bubbles. Well, one of the other students in my group didn't plug the thing properly, and the plug fell out, with the Mg being stuck in the tube, now without the HCI. Or HCl, I'm not quite sure which is which. So I asked him how to get the tube back, expecting him to tell us to discard the HCI solution I'm going to keep going with, rinse with water, and start over. I had read the safety section in my textbook, which had this approach to working with acids. His response? He insisted that I stick my ungloved hand in the solution just to grab the plug, and then, still in the solution, plug it back in. He wouldn't even put his own hands to do it, so my high school self thought this was an inherently bad idea. I took some more Mg from the workbench and kept adding it to the solution until it stopped reacting, eating up all the HCI just to leave water. And it kept getting worse. One day, he brought what he claimed were illegal fireworks into the classroom and started setting them off. He thought it was funny to point them at us, wearing no safety equipment or goggles, and hoodies that could have easily caught the fiery things. He frequently would leave the room while a group of school kids were playing with Bunsen burners and caustic chemicals, so in combination with the total lack of education, I didn't feel safe. Did I mention he was sexist too? I'm a girl, by the way, and all of the boys got A's on tests, with no explanations. He even lost one of the other boys' tests and straight up said in front of me and the rest of the class that he would just give them an A-, assuming that he had done well. Later on, I had asked the other students for help understanding something, and even he didn't know what was going on in the course, so I knew it was just BS. Every other girl I asked was getting the same inexplicable grades that I was. This wasn't unusual on its own either, as I lived in a very conservative area and had several sexist teachers. Just usually, they'd at least still grade fairly. Last contextual thing, my high school teachers' union had negotiated for tenure. After coming to college, I've learned that this is a very unusual thing, and in retrospect, it's an idiotic thing. This chemistry teacher was tenured, which meant that there was basically no way to fire him. Honestly, I felt bad for the bitter old man because after a botched surgery, he was constantly in pain. He was still teaching because he refused to retire, and he had a son going through college that he needed to pay for. But at a certain point, this was affecting my chances of getting into college. I wasn't about to let one man's issues affect prospects for the rest of my life. So I looked up recording laws for my state and found that it was a one-party consent state, meaning that I could legally record my teacher, audio ally, as long as the campus didn't say anything against it. They had no policies, and I was one of the parties consenting. So for a month, with my grade tanking despite hours of studying and 3 study books on the course, I recorded him. I recorded the fireworks, his lambasting female students, his crying in the back chemical storage room, leaving us unsupervised. I recorded the 3 times he had left campus inexplicably, leaving the front office to send a last-minute substitute to open the door and let us in. You know, the 15 minutes and I'm legally allowed to leave meme? That was a constant joke for my class. And then I made a throwaway Gmail to make a throwaway Dropbox account, big at the time. I uploaded everything and emailed it to my superintendent with the ultimatum that if something wasn't done, I would email the recordings to the local news and that I really didn't want to do that. Within a day, I heard back, with her assuring me that I wouldn't be punished for ratting him out. My parents, her, and myself met. We went over grades, my unmarked tests and homework, and the videos. They asked me first to talk over my concerns with the teacher, and I said I was uncomfortable with that given his treatment of female students. The superintendent said she wouldn't tell the teacher who submitted the evidence, but that they needed to speak with him about the concerns to hear his side of the story. My parents and I said it was completely reasonable as long as my name was never mentioned. The next day, the teacher said he needed to speak with me after class alone. I told him I couldn't, as I had another course after that, and he said that it was important. I turned my phone's recorder on again right before the class ended, and as I was packing up, he approached me. Due to the shape of the classroom, I was literally backed into a corner, and would have had to push this man to the side to get out. He then started saying that one of the students in the course had brought unfounded concerns and lies to the administration about what was going on in the course, and that he knew we hadn't always gotten along well, but that he hoped I wouldn't have done that to him. I lied through my teeth and said that I didn't know what he was talking about, but he was making me uncomfortable by blocking my access to the door and that I was late for my next class. He didn't even deny what I was saying, just that since I clearly had a problem with him, he'd be willing to stay after class with me specifically, since it seemed like I was struggling so much. After that, I told him I really needed to get to my next course, and he finally moved. I emailed the superintendent that recording during my next course, and CC'd my parents. My parents were furious. The superintendent was mad too because while my parents were poor, they dressed up nicely. My mom was an expert in bluffing about getting a lawyer that we totally couldn't afford, so a liability lawsuit was probably ringing through the lady's mind. Since the district couldn't fire him, he was put on immediate permanent medical leave. While the district was still paying his full pay, they gave us one unqualified substitute after another. 2 months before the national exam for the course, they gave us a female teacher that they had pulled out of retirement, but that had actually taught the advanced chemistry course for years. She was a godsend, and even held 8-hour Saturday classes so that we could catch up with the curriculum at least enough to pass the class. In those 2 months, we covered just enough of the tests material that our class had a 50% pass rate. According to my upperclassmen friends, this was a lot higher than it had been for their years, with less than 10% of the class passing. The superintendent also wrote me a thank you college recommendation letter, partially to keep me quiet and partially because they had been trying to get rid of this guy for years. My little sister took this course a couple of years after me and said that the new teacher was competent and that they were still at a 50% pass rate. Also, mods, if you don't believe me, I can send you proof. I still have some of the recordings, and one of them ends with another kid going, "I still don't understand any of this." TLDR, I got my dangerous sexist high school chemistry teacher semi-fired by secretly recording him. I'm finishing up at a good college now, so I've got absolutely no regrets. Edit, just found the recordings again and forgot that he thought Ebola was a conspiracy. Such a 5-star education. This happened in the USA, by the way. Sorry, should have clarified. Screw me over the day I'm supposed to start a job. Enjoy your worst sales year in decades. Background. A few years ago, I worked in the wine industry and I traveled to Australia to try and broaden my experience of the industry as well as of life and to try out living abroad for a while. I also knew the pay there was vastly higher than what it was at my home at the time in the UK. I had quite a bit of experience, a decent CV resume, great qualifications in the industry, and academically I was young and eager. At the time, I had a 1-year work visa, but this could have been extended to 2 or longer depending on the employer. I applied for loads of jobs. Many were listed on the various employment websites, industry-specific ones, Gumtree. If I liked the sound of it, I applied for it. I also wrote to various wineries in the area that I really liked with my CV and various details. I got a lot of replies, but one of my favorites got back to me. They put me in touch with their hiring manager. I was stoked to have an interview with one of my favorite wineries in the region. For a sales rep job. I drove to the winery, met with the hiring manager, and had the interview of my life. I nailed it. To this day, I've never had a better interview. I met the winery manager, got along great, and at the end of the interview, the hiring manager told me I was a shoo-in and that they'd be in touch shortly to let me know if I got the job, followed by a very reassuring wink/nod. The very next day, I got a phone call saying that I had been delighted to have me as their regional sales rep, and we discussed a start date. This winery was several hours out of the city, so I had to move quite a distance, rent an apartment, buy a car, and so on. This cost the vast majority of the savings I had accumulated back home before the move. A few days before the starting date, I give them a call to let them know I am moved and that I'm looking forward to starting, and to ask if they wouldn't mind if I came along a few days before just to get a better lay of the land, etc. They said the owners weren't around, so don't bother coming in, but call again tomorrow. I did, and again the owners weren't around. I was due to start on Monday, so I figured, oh well, I guess I'll meet them then. I showed up bright and early, 20 minutes early, on the first day, ready to meet the crew and get sucked in. I walked around until I found someone, as the cellar door and main areas weren't open yet. They told me to hang around until someone showed up. Eventually, the general winery manager appears, and when I say I'm supposed to be meeting with him, the hiring manager and the owners today, his eyes widen, he goes a little white, and then, after some lets me know that they aren't ready today and need a few more days to sort things out, but to call back in the afternoon to find out when I'm really supposed to start. I call back and it goes to voicemail. I leave a voicemail saying, hey, it's no worries, let me know which day this week you'd like me to start. I call the hiring manager I had spoken to before. That goes to voicemail. I do the same. 2 more days pass and I'm starting to get irritated. I want to start work. I call the hiring manager again, who picks up. I'm civil as I can be, but I do ask why I haven't been called back. She lets me know that the owners have changed their mind and don't want to hire me anymore. She admitted that this was pretty shitty and she'd been trying to convince them to take me, but they had issues with the fact that I was a temporary worker and wouldn't be there for more than 2 years. I let her know that there were options for extending my ability to stay in the country, etc. She said she knew, but they were adamant. I was pretty pissed at this point, so I decided to call them directly. Their number was easy to find, so I called them and left a voicemail asking them to call me back, and another voicemail a day later, all the time remaining as polite as I could. Eventually, I called them from Skype with no number, and they actually picked up. I asked why they no longer wished to hire me, and they tried to explain that I could apply for an extension/sponsorship if they liked having me. Then came the line, we just don't want a Palmy working for us. Plain and simple, mate. You dicks. This had nothing to do with the sponsorship. You just don't like Brits. I'm not even a Palm. This is typically slang reserved for English. I'm Scottish. I terminate my lease, cancel my internet, and drive back up the coast about 2,000 AUD in the hole, not including the price of the car, fuel, food, time wasted, etc. Revenge. Pissed off, but at this point desperate for money, I stay at a hostel and begin job hunting again. This time there's a pretty great job as a regional manager and buyer for a decently sized chain of liquor stores. This is a little beyond my previous experience, but F it. I go for it. I get the job, and suddenly I'm responsible for 7 stores and the purchases they make. 7 big stores that buy a lot of wine. When store managers make their weekly orders, it's done through an online system where the various products and quantities were put in. There was a short window between the order being submitted and the order actually going through to be fulfilled. I simply canceled each and every store's order with the wines from that winery. I did that every single week until I left. Each store was ordering between 15 and 30 cases of the producer's wine per week, an average of about $6,000 per store in sales. Closer to $4,000 per order per store. When the store managers saw that their stocks were dwindling or gone and asked me about it, I simply said that they'd changed their pricing and we can't afford to sell it right now. Every time their sales rep, who didn't know me, called to ask what the problem was, I just told him that their product wasn't moving and we don't need any stock right now. He didn't even think to compare previous year's sales records. He'd have seen that their previous wine was great and that it had always sold well. I wasn't there long. I hated that job, the hours, and the stress of taking care of 7 freaking stores and their problems. But the revenge was sweet. After 4 months, I packed it in, and I reckon their shitty attitude cost them over $400K in sales. I could have made that for them if they'd hire me. TLDR, Winery hires me, backs out at the last minute, so I sabotage their regional sales, costing them many times over what my yearly salary would have been. And with that, folks, we've reached the end of today's video. If you liked it, be sure to leave a like as well as subscribe. That way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.